thank you for joining us for the rules meeting today. We'll certainly go about an hour or so. If we need to go a little bit after, I've been told we do have the time to accommodate that. We'll just more or less see what you guys are asking and what I can inform you about. I hope to split this up into 3 separate areas. We'll be starting with some old business, some things that happened back in February, pre-COVID, some things we were deciding over the summer, and then certainly looking forward to any new rule changes and adaptations we can make entering this season. If you are able to see it, and I believe my screen is sharing this, so, okay. I just switched to the tournament manual. Are you able to see that now?
Yes, we can see that.
Marvelous. Okay.
What page do you want us on of the manual?
Nothing quite yet. I'm just going to make, I'm more or less showing you some of the notes at the very back to kind of give a background of what's happened recently. So if you'd like to follow the pages, I'm at the bottom of page 51. I took over as rules chair this past fall, so it's been about a year now. I was tasked in early 2020 to kind of go through and clean up the tournament manual where there were some minor contradictions, some issues here or there. And what you'll notice is the CC on the screen is going to be my initials. On 2/11/20, I made my first addition to the tournament manual, and that was protecting for schools. Something that's been discussed at length, and certainly you've been made aware about, I hope. We'll certainly let you know about it here too. But you can read specifically, it's eliminating protect for schools in semifinals and making it more about the balance of power for who the best competitors truly are. Now, that was back on 2/11 of this year. I do want to direct your attention to the numerous changes that took place starting on 2/27. I'll walk you through kind of what happened a little bit. I sat down that evening, that was 2/27, and thought, I'm going to start making these minor changes, should be fine. As you can see, those minor changes, I kept noticing, okay, well, let's fix this. More or less just phrasing, eliminating contradictions, cleaning up some of the language, kept going. We're now on page 53 now. You'll notice at some point I crossed over into the next day. A little after midnight, I kept going. And this is where probably the most, I shouldn't say permanent, prevalent changes happened here. And even then, I wouldn't say they're that important, but you should be aware of them. I'll direct your attention to 2/28/20, where I changed rule 7B3. There had been some contradictions of the tournament manual as to when entries were due entering sectionals. Sometimes it stated Saturday, sometimes it stated Sunday. Now it's official. Before sectionals, your entries are due on the Sunday, and that language has been changed. And you can see that here, that change has been made. Making sure we're very clear about the late entry fee deadline of $50. That's certainly here too. And I'm not going to read through every one of these. I've given too many presentations to fall into that trap. But you can see there were also numerous changes made too. But the most prevalent ones, like I said, was the Saturday to Sunday. We also were very clear about accommodating those with special needs, particularly those who have any issues with sight. That judges are now not encouraged, but certainly mandated to give audible time signals as opposed to the visual ones that have happened in the past. You'll continue to see other things that were in the tournament manual that we simply just struck that were no longer needed. At the top of my page, you'll see where it says rule XM 7-10. There was a lot of coaching taking place in the tournament manual, and we've tried to avoid doing that. We want to leave certainly coaching up to the people who do it best, all of you. And a lot of these this phraseology has been pulled out in order to give some leeway to those coaches. And that takes us up to 2/28/20. This was just prior to sectionals to make sure this is very clear. And no changes have been made since, although after today and tomorrow, there will be some on the way. This is the teacher in me. How are we doing so far? Is there any clarification, questions, or comments you'd like to make before I proceed to the next section? All right, the next thing I'd like to direct your attention to. Oh, I see, is there something there? I see in the chat box we got something. Thank you. So for rules for speech and debate, yes. Mainly for those who were visually impaired, there were verbal time signals. That was the specific change that was made. There was already other language included for other accommodations, uh, so no additional changes were made. Of course. The major thing we discussed as far as rule changes are concerned in the tournament manual came up at this summer's meeting. We were discussing judge types, and that has been something that has been, I'll be brief, vague at times, and it's something we wanted to try to rectify and remedy when possible. We've all had to enter in our A, B, and C judges, and at times knowing what type of judge we have can be difficult to discern. I've also on my team had judges that I think are truly at their heart A judges, but based on the tournament manual, could only be maybe a B at best or possibly even a C. What we're hoping to do with these proposed changes to the tournament manual is give a better way to assess the judge quality to create a better type of tournament. And I'm going to show those to you now in this PDF. So I'm going to pull that up right now. Hopefully you are seeing, and it's actually mid-page. Can someone give me a high sign or some verbal cue that you can see the proposed but not final descriptions for judge types?
Yes, we can see that, Chad.
God bless you. Thank you. Just making sure. So what you're seeing here first off is the proposed changes for judge types. Please rip this apart. I have iron self-confidence. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I want the body to have some say in this, and this is a great first step for us to provide that information. What we have right now is the proposed definition for an A judge. There's a lot of discussion on how we like A judges to be defined based on years of judging experience as well as tournaments. It's difficult to ascertain how good a judge is, of course, but experience is a great determinant. Someone who's had a lot of experience, despite everything else, certainly should know how to judge. So what you're looking at is 4 years of judging experience or 15 tournaments. Anybody that meets that criteria becomes an A judge. Next, we talked about judging experience for assistant coaches and theater and speech teachers. If someone is an assistant coach or a theater and or speech teacher, we'd like to think that on that basis, they are already somewhat qualified to judge a speech tournament. With that said, because speech tournaments are unique in their style and the vast array of performances across speech and debate, it was suggested that we do 2 years of judging experience or 8 tournaments in addition to their role as an assistant coach or teacher of these respective categories. Finally, and this is something that I'm curious we'll discuss later, head coaches are difficult to ascertain. If someone is a first-year head coach, they may not have the true experience of other judges, but in being a head coach, we have the assumption that they are well informed enough about what we do to be considered an A judge, as every team should have at least one A judge. And if you've ever run a tournament, you know exactly what I mean. That is the one criterion that I look at and I wonder, it's probably a little iffy, but I think a necessary evil. And the same goes for former head coaches at any level. We don't want to discriminate whether they be at the collegiate level or even the middle school level. If someone has been a head coach for a school, we want them to be an A judge. Now, I'm happy to hear any of your comments. And again, please feel free. I know this group is willing to comment. We're going to continue going down to B and C judges in a moment. Is there anything you guys would like to share at this time?
Hey, Chad, can you go in for the new coaches and explain to them exactly what this A, B, and C means so they understand the importance of that?
Fred, thank you for that. I think I got ahead of myself and forgot we will have some new coaches here. What we do when we have a speech tournament is in order to run that tournament, we will need judges. And specifically at the playoff level, but also at individual tournaments, when I say playoffs, I mean sectionals, districts, state, we need to know what kind of judges we're dealing with, because ideally we'd like to have in final rounds and semifinal rounds, the more experienced judges working together, as some rounds may actually have, at state, for instance, 7 judges. The tournament manual already tries to take into account a vast array of judges. We try to have a diversity based on the different schools they're from, the different areas of the state that they're from. But ideally, we like to have the highest level of coaching possible. In some instances, and this gets deep into the tournament manual, we like to have nothing lower than BBC. One proposal for the tournament manual is to say, once you hit a certain level, be it quarterfinals or semifinals, you try to avoid C judges as much as possible. The ranking system is A is the highest, B is the midway point. C, and I'll get to this later, is really for the judges with the least amount of experience. And we'll go on to talk about that in a moment. So, Fred, I hope that did some justice to what we're talking about here without going too much down the rabbit hole.
Perfect.
All right. Anything else? I'm not one to rush things, but I hate for awkward silences or just lulls when we can get things going too. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss about A judges?
I think we have a few questions in the chat.
Yes.
I think there's a few questions in the chat.
Okay, let me head back there. I like that. If you haven't read what Dave added, and this is kind of what we get into with B judges as well. No, I completely appreciate that. So addressing the first question about social studies teachers, if we're talking about speech extemp discussion, I certainly think they'd be very much qualified. And I'm going to take a note of that to bring that up at the meeting later today, that maybe we should add something about certain teachers for certain events. I certainly have that in the B portion, but I do want to include area teachers as well in specific areas. Training videos. Thank you for that. I do want to get into that with the training video. When I approach Judge C types, I certainly will approach that. Just know that is on the way. Thank you for that. Again, keep it coming. Anything that you want to say this way, I'm happy to address. I don't want anybody walking away feeling like they didn't have their voice heard. I'm going to go ahead and move on to B judges. Do not be afraid to interrupt me, please. I even tell my students this when I teach too. I'm never opposed to being interrupted if it moves forward the discussion we're trying to have. As we look forward to B judges then are that mid-type judge. They're a little more attainable to bring to a tournament. And it also makes it easier for us to put them into a round because a B judge paired with an A judge makes a great panel. And even in the early preliminary rounds, if you have B judges mixed with C judges, you still get a pretty good panel of judges to judge any event. What we're proposing here is that any judge with 2 years of judging experience or 8 tournaments, whichever one they meet first, that qualifies as a B judge. One concern we did have is that years of judging experience may not be the best determinant just because they may have only judged 1 tournament that year. So again, if we did make the change simply to tournaments, that would work. But the issue there is that if you're on a team that doesn't go to that many tournaments, but are still competing year in and year out, there is some disadvantage to those schools in finding judges. So we've tried to balance it out with both. That's why you see 2 years or 8 tournaments. Then we have the assistant coaches again that have less than the benchmark we set as an A. Next, we come to former competitors. This will be something different from the national level. And again, for my new coaches, NSDA, the National Organization for Speech, they are a little tougher. They will actually say that students have to be out of school for, I think it's 2 years, correct me if I'm wrong, before they can judge. We've left it vague in saying former competitor. There is language that says that former competitors cannot judge, and this is where it gets tricky, and I want to get your feedback, cannot judge their former events. This becomes problematic because it's difficult to enforce without having conversations with judges. Maybe it happens, you just happen to see it, but there's going to be more of a social aspect. So former competitor is tricky to enforce, but on the positive side, former competitors typically know this inside and out, and I would dare say many of my former competitors, even as freshmen in college, would rank up there with A judges. So I think to keep ourselves honest, we've put them in the B category for now until they reach the A benchmarks. Before I go any further, I've already dropped a lot on you. Please interrupt me, say something. I'm going to go back and check the chat box a little bit too, see if I missed anything there.
So you're suggesting that former competitors, even at the sectional and state level, would be B judges straight out of high school, freshmen in college?
And that actually is in line with what the tournament manual already says, yes. And that would be a status quo unless we want to propose some type of change.
Is there any concern that they would know the competitors in their own category from their own school? Or, well, I guess they would be banned from seeing their own schools because they would probably be judging for their own schools. But do you think they'd have any connection with former competitives that were their friends on the team just the year before?
And I want to add on to that. Another concern I share with that is that some of these kids are involved in 5 or different events. I know my kids, will compete across 3 or 4 events before they go to sectionals and find their sweet spot. There's a chance that if you do have some kids that have competed against these kids, could very much judge them because they competed at them at some tournaments throughout the season. We could add language that says they can't judge in any event they ever competed in the previous year. I just wonder how well we can legislate that. I think that becomes difficult. I don't want to abandon this topic, but I do see some things in the chat box I would like to address. First off, we have, what about college competitors that did not compete in high school? I think that's a great thing, and I'm going to add that right now. College speech competitors, that is a unique situation I honestly did not consider. Thank you. And I would still probably likely say that would put them in the B range if they had no experience at the high school level. Although my gut tells me they probably would be A judges, I would probably play it safe there. Does judging at middle school competitions count toward the standard? We didn't explicitly say that, but I think that was the implication. But we can certainly be explicit in that. I would even say judging at the collegiate level as well should be added there too. We will get to the judge training aspect here in a moment. I do want to talk about that. I will be getting there for B quality. Okay, Dave, I want to address what you're saying. Getting getting coaches trained with the individual blocks. I almost wonder, that's a lot to keep track of. I'm not sure if you were to put a kid in front of me, if I would know every event they did last year. If they're coming back to me, contacting me in November, hey, I'd like to judge at a meet, I may forget an event they possibly competed in. I do wonder about that. But with that said, if we can be consistent on that, I'm up to certainly. Dave, are you suggesting we move them up to A judges then if we get the blocks in, or keeping them at B? I know you're in class. That's hard. Cool. So I want to go back, Dylan, to answer your question. I think at least the way the rules exist right now, we're trying to say that if you have experience in speech or in debate, that we're using those along the same lines, the way the language is implied right now. So as a debate head coach, I'm sorry, I'm assuming head coach. I shouldn't make that assumption, but I would still think you'd fall along the lines of either head or assistant coach under those terms. So the fact that it's speech versus debate wouldn't necessarily make a difference. But again, I'd want to check the language to be sure on that. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. You'd be in the A range. Let's get back. Thank you guys for being so involved here. And I agree with what Dave's saying too. I really like the idea of going back to experience judging, because you can have a competitor that's amazing, but judging is a different animal altogether. Maybe we could talk about competitive experience and add that element in as well. That's certainly something to consider. Because a former competitor could be someone that, just went to one sectional tournament and maybe only did one event, didn't get a lot of experience. That could be tricky too. And by no means is this perfect, but let's get as close as we can. So I'm going to go back to my PDF here. Hopefully as you're following along. I want to get, after former competitor there, we have teachers other than theater and speech. And I'm going to go ahead and say the next one as well, which is speaking professional. The old language said speaking professional, then had parentheses, and then said lawyer teacher. Notice my pause to let that sink in. That's incredibly vague when you talk about a speaking professional with only 2 examples. There's no notation of EG as an example or IE, or specifically that is these 2. It was left somewhat vague. What we're hoping to do here is say that teachers other than theater and speech are automatically B judges, because teachers do have experience working with students, being in a school setting, and themselves are speaking professionals. The issue the group had with this, I'm really playing devil's advocate with myself here. But our group was concerned that some teachers, God bless them, are not speaking professionals, and we love them. We're glad they're in what we do. But I think we can all agree we know of some teachers that are not speaking professionals. So that becomes problematic as well. But that's why we even out with the B judge for here. Dave has already mentioned maybe we specify what they do. That requires more on the coach's side, but creates for a better judge panel. Finally, if you look below, it says speaking professional. This was an issue we had because with lawyer teacher, that didn't give us much to go on. You may have someone who is a social studies teacher, for instance, that would be a great discussion judge, but maybe they would be a C judge in respect to drama. We would leave it open to the coach putting it in. If you did mark speaking professional as your B type judge, we would ask that you type in a description of what makes them a speaking professional. So when we're working on SpeechWire, and I have experience doing this both at sectionals and at state debate, when we're trying to figure out what judge to put into a round, that kind of description can save the panel for a round and would make a huge difference in the quality of judging that we put forward at these events. So that would ask a little bit more, but if someone marks speaking professional, that description would allow us a little more leeway in where to put them as a B judge to ensure higher quality. That concludes what we're saying for B judges. I would love to hear your comments. There's a lot we can still hash out here. So I'm going to go back to allowing former competitors to be judges. I think that's where we keep trying to find that golden mean somewhere where we can be in the middle. Yes, there's a lot of experience, but we're balancing that out with a lot of bias because they are so fresh out of high school and out of competing. If they compete enough to reach that benchmark of 8 tournaments or 2 years, then we can certainly put them at A level and free them from their bias. It's tough. I mean, really, this is not just something we threw together in a few minutes and hope would work. We're really trying to find that perfect balance to make this work. We take it very seriously to have the best panel possible. And that brings me to the last section. And you'll notice I've added a different word in here that did not appear in the tournament manual previously. Trained judges. In order to qualify as a C judge, it must be a trained judge. Now, this is wishful thinking. We've all heard the horror stories of the people that grabbed the bus driver off the bus when they pulled in because they needed that one last judge. I will admit, my bus drivers also judge, but I contact them 2 weeks ahead of time and they see my training video before they walk in this. So lest you accuse me of being a hypocrite here, yes, my bus drivers do judge, but it's not an emergency situation. We do understand that in some cases, in order to get your entries in, you will throw a judge in. We've all been put in a situation like that. What we're hoping is that if you're going to bring a judge that's marked as C, the bare minimum, the floor of a judge is a trained judge. And this goes back to the video situation. Even with a video, we have some issues. The video may exist, but we also cannot guarantee that people have seen the video. I'm the first to admit that I've been sent training videos for things as a teacher that I may have skimmed, or maybe I had playing in the background while I was completing other things. As much as it would be nice to have, and I think I can't pull it up right now, Oscar caliber training videos, if people are not watching them, they're still just a C judge or below that. So I do agree. That is something that needs to be done, training videos of higher quality and very specific terminology, but it still falls under the human aspect of things. But I'd like to encourage, as we change the tournament manual for rules, we emphasize, and we can even bold trained as needed, that the bare minimum for a judge would be a trained judge. If you were there for the duo presentation, even trained head coaches sometimes didn't know the rules for duo, perhaps. So I do worry about saying that, oh, well, everybody's an A judge because there's a video out there. Human error prevents me from embracing that. So this is the proposal. I've already got some notes to remind you of those notes I've taken so far. Specifics for teachers, social studies, otherwise, maybe we were able to bump those up in certain areas. College competitors, I want to add that phraseology in there, that if someone is a college competitor, I'd like them to be in the same caliber as a B judge. And then, of course, with experience can move up to A. We also mentioned competitive experience. Maybe we talk about how much competitive experience we put in for former competitor. And then I also like the idea that let's see, I'm reading this. Yeah, if someone has judging experience at the middle school or college level, that still counts toward their experience, tournaments, and years as well. That's what the body has shared with me so far. I'm going to turn it back over to you guys and check if we have anything. Ronnie, we agree. I've just read your first sentence. We agree. I'm going to keep reading. And I think I said that when we talked about making a head coach an A judge. Every school needs to have an A judge. When creating panels, when trying to make sure we avoid bias and have a judging pool stable enough to hold a tournament, every school needs to have at least one A judge. In theory, God bless theory, the head coach should be an A judge. With that said, I understand that new coaches may not have the experience or expertise. But for a competitive balance, we have to keep them as an A judge. That doesn't mean we'll put them in throw them into the fire right away and make them, put them on the first A panel we need. But that is something that we have to make that devil's bargain and make them the A judge. And maybe that's something we could do too, is that maybe we put in years of experience next to every judge, but that becomes a lot of work when there's already so much paperwork to fill out when entering sectionals and state. I don't want to do that to coaches if we can avoid it. I think all I've done is share problems with you. I'm sorry.
Hey, Chad.
Yes.
This is Fred. I think the one thing that the education committee, what we can look at is possibly specifically to address this concept of what a trained judge is maybe we can create a judge training curriculum that's very simple that any school can use. And then that way, we can, maybe verify at the time that the school registers that they are using the judge training curriculum or something similar. And maybe they can send in their, whatever they're using to train their judges. And then they can say, yeah, this is okay. This meets all of our requirements. But to have some bare requirements that judges have to meet. And I'm not saying that can happen this year, but I think that would be on a good step for us to lead toward having some kind of certification. And then new judges would at least, or new coaches and new programs would at least have a starting point. Because if you're a brand new coach who's never done speech and you're telling me I need to train judges, well, hell, I don't know how to judge. Let's be real. So how am I going to train someone else? So that's something that the ed committee can look at, and we can work quickly on trying to pull some stuff together. I think I'll volunteer Dave to work on that piece.
He's in class, so I don't think he can object right now. Perfect.
That's the reason why I said it. Yeah.
Perfect. Ironically, he had the last comment, and thank you, Fred. I love that idea of having a fail-safe. And I want to go out there. I don't think anything we propose or change is going to create a perfect situation, but we're trying to get as close as we can to that perfect situation and continue to grow. That's all we can do. Looking at what Dave said, not for discussion, just to Fred. Education creates. Okay, perfect. We're all on the same. We're all on the same page. I'm about to transition from judge types to other materials. I don't want anybody to feel left out. If there's anything else you would like to say concerning the judge types, we will be taking this to our meetings later today to discuss before anything goes in the tournament manual. By all means, please let me know. And if you're like me and you think of something like 45 minutes from now, I hope you'll contact me. You can find my email on the website. I can even include it here. My IHSFA, for IHSFA, is it our first name or initial? I'm going to look up my phone, friends.
It's initial.
Thank you.
So it's D Chenowith.
C Chenowith, IHS. So if you do think of something you'd like to add to this, instead of making you go through the bowels of the website, there's my email right there. You hit me up. We'll make it work. We'll get it in there. So other things that have come up for the future now that we're looking toward that I'd like to discuss. There are going to be some changes, of course, with the way we do things, considering COVID and the way we run tournaments. Just in the last session for Duo, the discussion came about recording devices in rounds. This may be something that we have to strike, just because we may need recording devices to simply make the tournaments work. At this moment, and I can say this specifically because I had a parent that was really hard on me for this. Those in Section 3 know what I'm talking about. He pushed very hard to have recording devices in rounds. His son was a state competitor in discussion, and he missed a family vacation to compete at state. The dad wanted to have cameras at every round his son was in at the state tournament. Yeah, so that was awkward, but according to the rules, 1.3 on page 3, it says that there no recording devices are available. Be aware this is something we may have to change, or we'll allow for a year or so. So if you're like me and you read the tournament manual every night, just know we're aware of that and we'll probably change it. I don't actually read it every night. That was an attempt at sarcasm. It's hard when we're online like this. Other things that have been tossed around a little bit too, and this is a pre-COVID proposal. Pre-COVID, there has been discussion of allowing, or ironically, discussion about allowing discussion to double once again. This has been brought to me by a few sources, and we're not going to do it right away, but the rationale is this. A lot of coaches are telling me now that discussions are lasting less than half an hour. And when I run my meets, I think they're running around 40 minutes is what I'm noticing, but okay. Before COVID, we were going to ask coaches who are hosting to keep a time on their discussions to see how long they're lasting, to see if doubling is viable. I know. Discussion. With that said, and this is solely from me personally, if we do start going to videotaped tournaments where you have to send in videos of performances, I'm not saying we're there yet. My discussion kids personally are like, well, if that's what we're doing, can I double if I'm in discussion? And I'm like, oh, chimachi. Let's just get the season going first. But in full disclosure to you, friends, coaches, that may be something that's on the table as well. So we've still got about 20 minutes. What other rules situations would you like to discuss that we've already gone over? Or is there anything that's on your mind that we can consider entering the business meeting coming up today or the board meeting tomorrow? Dave, to answer your question, that's exactly the question I posed to the father. He says, well, coaches for football. And whenever someone compares speech to football, can we just have a moment? Thank you. We had our moment. No, yeah, if we're recording competitors, well, that becomes the issue too that I share with the father, is that you're clearly seeing faces. Now, I know I have documentation for my own students that they've signed off that they can be on videotape, but I can't say the same for my friends at Canterbury or at Homestead. I don't know what they've done in our sectional yet. So that makes it very difficult at that point. So I think I addressed Fred's concern. Ronnie, I want to get you in here. I miss hearing your guys' voices. Please chime in when possible. But I get it. The chat box is better organized.
I just also want to, be respectful of not just jumping in and cutting people off. Could. But so a good question I had was, so this was just something that I thought, we're making adaptations for virtual tournaments. And I'm so glad to hear that. And I appreciate that, and I'm willing to help out in any way I can as part of the interpret committee to help with whatever we need to help with, writing rules for virtual tournaments. But have we considered, and it's just something maybe to consider, I guess, like the possibility of pushing back the tournaments at all, just in case, like with the craziness that is just schools. Like I know I can only speak for my district. Our district is still 100% virtual, and we are only permitted to meet virtually. Like our speech team is only permitted to meet virtually. I think that all trips are pretty much canceled. I'm pretty sure they're canceled all first semester. So I didn't know if any arrangements were being made to kind of push back the tournaments to allow for some time for programs to get their stuff together.
I can't speak for pushing back dates necessarily, and I want to emphasize what Fred's typing right now. There are arrangements in the works. I think you'll probably see more during the business meeting for the playoff series to be virtual. I can't speak to what that's going to look like. But to your point, I'm in the same boat. My Section 3 friends, we know this too. I usually host a Section 3 tournament in October. And I pulled all the sectional 3 coaches back in August. I'm like, these are our options. What do you want to do? And almost overwhelmingly, they said, if we're going to get kids to this tournament, virtual is how we're going to get kids there, based on parental concerns, administrative concerns, and even the concerns of the students themselves. As much as they hate it, they know that's probably the best way to make tournaments happen. But to echo the words of our executive director, speech is speech when we can interact with each other. And we're trying to find the middle ground that's best. I don't have answers now, but we're aware of the situation. We're going to do our best to make it work. So... And thank you for not saying unprecedented times. I appreciate that.
And I would like to add though too as well, in response to Ronnie's concern, is that, you know, this conference, I keep calling it clinic because it used to be called clinic when I first started, but this is the first time that we as an organization are actually getting together to have these conversations. And so some of this stuff is going to also be discussed in the business meeting. Tomorrow we have other workshops that deal specifically with virtual tournaments and whatnot. And then we have a board meeting tomorrow afternoon as well to have further discussions. So right now the schedule is what it is, but it can change. I think that we as the board, those of us that sit on the board, are going to have to use these workshops and this opportunity for us to kind of figure out what is it that the body really wants. So when you guys go to your sectional meetings this afternoon, please share those concerns with your sectional chairs, because every sectional chair is a board member. So they can bring that conversation back to the board. And then also too, if you have time and you feel like it, go to the board meeting. Our board meetings are open. So tomorrow afternoon, please come and participate in that as well. But I think this is the first time we as a community are actually getting together to talk about this, what's going on with COVID. So that's all I wanted to add.
Another way of getting involved too, and this is more me being lost in the paperwork here, I hope everybody is reading the tournament manual from time to time, not just because I'm on rules. Before I held this position, I would try to read through it once or twice a year just to kind of have a better feel for what's going on. I mean, I get it. That's the nerdly part of me, and I appreciate that in myself. But that's what keeps me honest as well, too, is if you see something in the tournament manual that you don't think is correct or you feel is vague, I'm completely open to that. As I stated earlier, I have otherworldly self-confidence. You're not going to hurt my feelings. And also, my personal value is not tied to the TM, to the tournament manual. I hope it is a living document we can continue to work together as a state to fix and make better for our students who compete. So by all means, hit me up on that anytime you want to. That pretty much concludes all my planned remarks for you guys. There has not been a complete overhaul on the tournament manual. Certainly, we're going to see some changes, I think, as we begin to address COVID, as we also look at the board meeting that's coming up. But for the moment, is there anything else so far as rules are concerned that you'd like to discuss here? And it doesn't have to be about changes, but maybe you're just like, have we ever considered trying it this way? That's part of what we're doing here, too, is to allow the body, you guys, to have some input to what these rules look like.
Chad,
Yeah.
have you guys talked about, like, with these remote tournaments, how would we do impromptu type things?
So far as I'm concerned, and this is for my own tournament with impromptu, I would probably follow the same format that Nationals did. And the way Nationals did it, they called it limited preparation, or I forget exactly what it was. I had a kid that was like top 30 in it. He got his topic about a month in advance and had a chance to record it. We would probably have to give those topics out in advance if we did it completely recorded. And I can only speak for my tournament. This is not me saying either way what the board will do for sectionals or state, but just a consideration I made. Do any other coaches have any ideas how they would run impromptu virtually?
I think for me, I've talked about this. So if I am, first off, wanting to run a tournament virtually either this semester or next semester, because I just know we need tournaments, and right now we're really low, and I want to do whatever I can to help, and I am willing to work with other coaches in the Indy area to make it happen. And so one of the things I think about, and this is just me, because I had kids do the 3P national tournament, and I had kids who did the the NSTA national tournament. And as much as I think kids need experience of speaking multiple times and getting that repetition, I think I probably would be asynchronous during like memorized events and things. But I would probably treat limited prep events synchronous, like with Zoom. You know, I would probably still keep those synchronous. That would include like discussion, extemp, and impromptu, and even like radio. Even if it's just for the one round where they do a on the spot. You know, keeping all the other kids in the waiting room would be easy, and letting one kid in at a time, like on Zoom, to do his prepared prompt or his 2-minute prep, you know, and 2-minute speak. So that's how I think I'm thinking about doing it. That's just a suggestion. And again, guys, I am open to whatever, because I definitely want to host this year.
Ronnie, to your point, we also considered maybe doing a blend where this is my discussion kids pushing me to do this, where we would allow for social distancing and discussion and allow them to come to the building. This is them pushing that. And I said, so you want me to reserve my entire school and have judges available to watch you just so you can do discussion in person? And they kind of, you know, sheepishly said that. I like what you're saying. If we do use Zoom, we can still allow for some type of discussion. And again, very similar to what we saw at Nationals, where at least individuals could introduce what they were doing. Extemp was completely online. And in my experience, I thought Extemp went well. I don't know anybody else that was at Nationals, how they felt about Extemp. I was honestly, the pessimist in me, I was surprised how well Extemp ran. So I think there's certainly room for what Ronnie's talking about.
I have a question, a totally different topic, but it lingers in the COVID zone. And that is the National, because they did everything virtually. You know, my World School team was constantly on their phone because they weren't in person together. Are we going to make provisions so that as we are doing virtual, that we're also going to wade in to letting our students use online sources? You know, National has a staged format of how they're going to accept online resources and letting kids do extemp resources online. But in Indiana, has that come to our attention in part one during COVID? If we're all virtual, they're going to be able to do it anyway. No one can patrol it. And then part two, a year from now, when we're planning an in-person season, perhaps.
Short answer, I've heard nothing about that yet, but I'm not going to lie to you and be like, oh, we're going to do this. I don't know at this point. I think that's going to be down the road for the discussion. I think it's a great question to bring up at the next few meetings that happen, because I think that is something we're going to have to address.
Question for impromptu, and I know it seems kind of off topic for those, but we're kind of in that realm. If we did do a recording, we let impromptu people walk out of the round in sectionals if they're doubled. So I just feel like it'd be simple and impromptu to send that topic ahead of time in an envelope that has, you know, a designed tape on it, that has some kind of design that would be difficult to break and not be able to put back together. And when they record their impromptu, they show the envelope at the beginning, unbroken seal, they unbreak the seal, and the time is right there. We just keep it normal.
We could even just email it to them at the appointed time. We email it to them, and they have to be ready to receive that email. They give us an email in advance, and then at the appointed time, we send that email. But again, we're relying on technology. When I like what you're saying, paper, we can rely on a little more than we can email. So, but something else to consider. Friends, thank you for being so involved. I know as I was doing this, I was wondering if this would only last like 10 minutes. Thank you guys for actually giving me, I took some great notes, and I will be bringing these to the board meeting. When the TM is updated, it will be updated on the website. You'll get to see what the final changes are, and nothing is written in stone. We can always come back and address these afterwards too. So thank you for all your input. Continue to email me throughout the day, please.
Thanks, Chad, for reading that manual so often. For those of us who don't read it at bedtime every night.
My children get sick of it as a bedtime story, but you know what? They're coming around. No, that I'm happy to go through it, because I think it does determine when you guys do need to read it. I want to make sure what's there is right and clear. So
thanks.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I'll stick around if anybody wants to talk about things as people start to, the numbers thin out. But thank you guys again for attending.